Hello, my name's Dan Hunt and I'm the Director of Regulatory Programs at EPA Victoria. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about Victoria's new waste framework. EPA acknowledges traditional people as the first peoples and traditional custodians of the land and water on which we live, work and depend. We pay respect to Aboriginal elders past and present. As Victoria's environmental regulator, we pay respect to how country has been protected and cared for by Aboriginal people over many tens of thousands of years. We recognise the unique spiritual and cultural significance of land, water, and all that is in the environment, and the continuing connection and aspirations for country of Aboriginal people and traditional custodians. In this session, we'll focus on some of the key responsibilities and requirements if you produce, transport or receive industrial waste in Victoria. Today we'll talk more about Victoria's new waste duties and waste classifications, how to classify and manage waste, requirements for business that generate, transport and receive waste, the waste tracker system, accredited consigners, waste permissions, where to find more information, and where to access applications and reporting tools. You'll note that for this session, we've changed our approach to make sure that we're in compliance with the current working restrictions. Before we begin, I want to go over how the session will be run and the information that you'll receive afterwards. We encourage you all to submit your questions throughout the webinar in the chat box on your screen. We'll be answering some questions about the waste framework within the chat, and we'll direct some to our panel during question time at the end of the session. Unfortunately, we won't be able to reply to everyone's questions, but we will incorporate them into future EPA communications and into our website content. Throughout the webinar, our team will be referencing the Act and regulations. We'll also reference several pages of EPA website content and publications we've produced as guidance to support your understanding of these new laws. After this webinar, you'll receive an email, which will have the slides, and that'll allow you to click through every link and document that we'll talk about today. We encourage you to read this information to get more detail on each of the topics we're covering during this session, and we appreciate it if you can share this information back through your business and through the people in your supply chain. Victoria's new environment protection laws commence on the 1st of July this year. The new laws focus on preventing environmental harm from occurring. New responsibilities exist for anyone who conducts an activity that might have an impact on the environment and human health. This includes production, transportation, and the receival of waste. The new laws are based on what's called the General Environmental Duty, or the GED. Under the new laws, the General Environmental Duty, you're responsible for understanding and assessing the risks of your activities and the risks that they may pose, and to eliminate or reduce those risks as far as reasonably practical. With the new duties, there are strong penalties for those who breach them, which includes, in some instances, imprisonment. Penalties for body corporates are now much higher, with an upper penalty level of $1.6 to $3.2 million. Individuals who commit aggravated offences can receive a jail term of up to 5 years. These increased penalties recognise the seriousness of harm caused to human health and the environment. On EPA Victoria's website, we have webinars and information on the new laws, regulations, and the GED, which we encourage you to view. The aim of today's session is to point out the key principles and the requirements of waste management in Victoria under the new Act and regulations. We'll leave you with a roadmap of the concepts and how to access further information, support and guidance to help you take the required steps to ensure that you're in compliance with the new law. The new laws change how EPA operates, shifting to a preventative focus. We will work with business to help everyone build their knowledge and ability to implement business practices that reduce risk. We'll do this by providing information for all businesses that includes sector-specific how-to guides, information about the new laws and regulations, and guidance. In turn, we expect business owners or operators to learn what their obligations are and then comply with them. We expect you to understand your duties as a producer, transporter, or receiver of waste. So your business must assess the risks of harm to human health and the environment, put processes and controls in place to minimise the risks, respond quickly and seriously to EPA's advice and suggestions when making changes, work to minimise environmental impact and repair any damage, be able to answer any questions and provide any information EPA may request. We expect you to be open and honest in your dealings with EPA. We will take on an escalating approach to enforcement depending on the circumstances surrounding any breach of the law. There is a wealth of information and resources for the waste and recycling industry available through EPA's website and through industry associations. The Waste and Recycling Sector Guide can help you identify which of your activities could cause harm from pollution and waste. This guide includes information about your legal obligations, starting with the general environmental duty, EPA's approach to compliance and enforcement, and common hazards in the waste and recycling sector. If you haven't done so already, now's the time to take action to prepare for the commencement of the new laws on the 1st of July this year. What you need to do to comply depends on the scale of your activities and how complex they are. It also depends on the nature of the risks you need to manage. The new laws introduce new responsibilities called the waste duties. The duties apply to all parties within the waste chain of responsibility, including waste producers, waste transporters, and waste receivers. The regulations set out how duty holders must comply with the duties. These duties apply when you're in the management or control of industrial waste as it moves through the waste chain of responsibility. All parties in the waste framework have a responsibility when they are in management or control of waste to ensure it's taken to a lawful place. Victoria's new waste framework ensures that industrial waste is properly classified and managed in a way that will prevent or reduce risk of harm from occurring. When the waste passes through the framework, it creates significant risks of mismanagement and opportunities for criminal activity to occur. This includes illegal dumping or stockpiling of waste, risk of fire, and inappropriate handling of hazardous materials. The GED requires that businesses in management or control of waste identify and implement controls to eliminate or minimise the risks associated with waste management. There are also specific duties that relate to industrial waste called the waste duties. The waste duties help ensure that the resource value of the waste has the best chance of being recovered and that the waste does not become a problem for others to manage. There are three key elements of the waste duties. One, properly identify and classify the waste. This makes it clear which duties apply to the waste, how to manage it, and where to send it. Two, ensure that, that it is transported appropriately. This includes providing sufficient information to the transportation company you're working with. And three, ensure that the waste is sent to a lawful place. We'll discuss each of these in more detail in today's session. It's important for everyone with a waste management responsibility in the framework to understand the concept of lawful place. A lawful place is somewhere authorised by EPA through a permission to receive specific types of industrial waste under law. If you create, transport or receive waste, you must make sure that it ends up at a lawful place for reuse, recycling, treatment, storage or disposal. On EPA's website, there's more information and guidance about the different types of lawful place. Our presenters this morning will also talk about the types of lawful place. It's an important concept, and there are penalties if your waste doesn't go to a lawful place of approximately $82,000 for individuals and $413,000 for companies. Someone convicted of an industrial waste duty offence twice in 5 years could face up to 2 years in prison. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Mark Bannister, to talk us through the responsibilities of a waste producer. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, my name's Mark Bannister. I'm the team leader of Waste and Contaminated Land Policy at EPA. So this section is going to focus on the requirements and responsibilities of businesses that generate waste. Any business that produces waste is required to take all reasonable steps to ensure the waste you produced will be received at a place that is authorised to receive it, also known as lawful place. By following the waste duties and sending your waste to a lawful place, you will help reduce risks from your waste. Producers of industrial waste must properly identify and classify it. This lets you identify which duties apply to the waste and what management is required. The Act defines waste broadly. A key element in understanding whether you have generated a waste is whether it's discarded, rejected, abandoned, unwanted, or surplus. This applies regardless of whether the waste has any use or value. Waste duties apply to industrial waste, which is waste arising from commerce, industry, trade, or laboratories. Waste duties encourage and facilitate lawful disposal and resource recovery. A lawful place is somewhere authorised to receive industrial waste under the law. If you create, transport, or receive waste, you have a duty to take all reasonable steps to ensure it ends up at a lawful place. There are several ways for a site to qualify as a lawful place, as seen on this slide. Ask the waste receiver which one applies to their site to identify it's a lawful place. A waste producer and transporter will be able to check the public register on EPA's website to make sure the waste receiver has a permission authorising that facility to accept your waste. Tim will speak about permissions later on in this webinar. Some sites may have an exemption granted by EPA, which you can also check on the public register. Lawful place pathways are described in detail in the EPA publication, How to Establish Your Lawful Place, which you can access on the EPA website. If you're a producer of waste, remember to ask them questions about where your waste is going and ask for proof that the waste would reach the destination. So I'll explain declarations of use and designations in a little more detail here. Declarations of use, or DOU, is a self-assessed agreement that supports the safe reuse and recovery of materials that are derived from low-risk wastes. You can make a DOU where you intend to use your industrial waste immediately at the site you're sending it to without needing to process it further or store it. The DOU is a short 2-page form that does not require EPA approval, notification, or tracking. The DOU includes a declaration from both the producer and receiver. The producer makes a declaration that describes the waste, identifies legitimate uses for it, assesses its risks to human health and the environment, provides details about how to minimise those risks. The receiver declares that the place or premises which the waste is to be received is suitable to use the waste. Both producer and receiver must sign the DOU. You cannot make a DOU if your waste is reportable priority waste that requires a transport permission. You cannot make a DOU for an activity that requires a permission or for material which is applied to land other than natural fibrous materials such as husks and untreated timber. You do not need to make a DOU if a determination applies. So declarations of use will be valid for up to 12 months or if there's a significant change to the type of waste. So determinations are a legal instrument that allows EPA to set standards for industrial waste to be lawfully received. Determinations work to reduce regulatory barriers for safe and effective use and recovery of certain waste streams, particularly those used at higher volumes. They are made by EPA and set required specifications for the lawful deposit, transport, and/or receipt of industrial waste, subject to conditions or limitations. This means the person place or premises will be authorised to receive the industrial waste, provided the material matches what is described in a determination. A determination will allow waste to be deposited and received without the need for a written declaration. A waste receiver must check that any material received meets the determination specifications. The determinations generally contain relatively few specifications, but remember, the general environmental duty will always continue to apply. Determinations can be revoked or amended over time by EPA. So EPA is starting out with 4 waste determinations for processed organics, livestock manure and effluent, fill material, and recycled aggregates. These will be published on EPA's website prior to 1 July 2021. So this is a straightforward pathway to meeting the waste duties. It doesn't require any acknowledgement, paperwork, or application to EPA. Waste duties are tied to the type of waste, which is referred to as the waste classification. If you're in management or control of the industrial waste, it must be properly identified and classified. It is the first step that gives you the information you need to understand what your waste duties are and how to manage your waste. You will need to provide your classification information to the transporter that is collecting your waste. Classifying waste also helps you understand the hazards and the containment and isolation requirements for its transport to a lawful place. It will also help you meet your obligations under the general environmental duty. The classification process helps you identify appropriate controls to put in place to manage that waste legally and safely. So Victoria's 3 new industrial waste classifications are shown in the images you see here, with some examples of each. Industrial waste includes commercial, industrial, or trade activities or from laboratories, household waste once it is gathered at a waste facility, for example, a transfer station, landfill, materials recovery facility. Common examples are aluminium, cardboard, cement sheeting, glass, textiles, paper, plastic, solid food waste, and steel. Priority waste is an industrial waste that carries additional obligations and can include solid or liquid waste. This can be due to its hazardous properties or its potential to facilitate resource recovery. Some examples are e-waste, liquid food and beverage processing waste, some industrial wastewaters, septic tanks and treated timber, septic tank waste rather, and treated timber. Reportable priority waste carries the most stringent controls. It is reserved for some of the types of waste with the highest hazards. If the waste is mismanaged, some examples include paints and resins, heavy metals such as copper, mercury, or strong acids, alkalines, and pesticides. If you're a business generating or dealing with waste, you have duties. You need to manage your risks on site and when you dispose of the waste. Depending on the type of waste your business produces, you may have to meet more than one duty to comply. The duties and controls associated with these waste types accumulate as you move into higher level classifications. For example, reportable priority waste must be managed in accordance with the industrial waste, priority waste, and reportable priority waste duties. In many circumstances, classifying your waste is very simple and you only need to do it once. You should maintain a record of your waste classification types for all the waste you produce. Classification will tell you if your waste is industrial waste, priority waste, or reportable priority waste. Most industrial waste are pre-classified in Schedule 5 of the regulations, including waste codes to enable transportation to occur to a lawful place. Schedule 5 will also tell you if the industrial waste other than soil is classified as priority waste or reportable priority waste. If it is reportable priority waste, you will need to use Waste Tracker to report on the waste as it moves through the waste framework and transport it in a permission vehicle. The publication for classifying waste you see here is available on the EPA website. Designations. Sometimes you can't classify new waste with the usual process for classifying waste. In these cases, we can issue a designation. So the regulations allow EPA to issue a designation that sets out the waste classification and a disposal category for that waste. When you apply for a designation, that designation applies only to you and will be recorded on EPA's public register. EPA can also make a designation of general application that applies to anyone managing waste under the circumstances covered by the designation. If you manage or control priority waste, contact us to discuss if you need a designation. If you do need one, you can apply through the EPA portal. The mismanagement of industrial waste is a serious issue and one of EPA's top priorities. If your business generates industrial waste, you have a responsibility under the GED and waste duties requiring you to manage that waste and where it goes to. Your reasonable steps may be different depending on the classification and type of waste. Higher risk waste requires more attention and verification. For all industrial waste, you need to do 3 things: classify the waste, provide information about the waste to the transporter, and verify that your waste is transported to a lawful place. If you generate priority waste, you must meet the industrial waste duties as well as the priority waste duties shown on the slide. You need to make sure that people transporting your waste understand the classifications and disclose any risks of harm to your transporter. This gives the transporter enough information to ensure that your waste is transported safely to a lawful place. Ask questions of your waste transport provider to make sure you know where they're taking the waste. If the waste is their priority waste, there is an additional duty to investigate alternatives to waste disposal, including avoiding producing the waste, reusing or recycling the waste, and resource recovery. You will also need to isolate your waste in a way that ensures resource recovery is still possible. If you are disposing your priority waste to landfill, you'll need to determine the disposal category. This applies to soils as well as other types of priority waste. Disposal categories determine which landfill can lawfully receive the waste and determines what kind of waste levy will apply. For priority waste, the categories are A, B, and C, and packaged waste asbestos. There are 2 additional categories for soils, category D and soils containing asbestos only. The characteristics and thresholds for determining the priority waste categories are in the EPA publication 1828, Waste Disposal Categories, Characteristics and Thresholds. When testing for contaminants, test for those that you would reasonably expect to be in the waste. There are lab screening processes that cover common contaminants, and we encourage you to continue to use those where no additional contaminants of concern are present. Reportable priority waste is the most hazardous type of waste and carries the highest level of controls. If you produce reportable priority waste, you will need to follow the specific duties for reportable priority waste and the requirements for priority and any industrial waste duties. The additional duties for reportable priority waste are that you must use a permissioned vehicle if you deposit, transport, or receive reportable priority waste. This does not include waste tyres. You must use Waste Tracker to inform EPA each time your waste changes hands. If you produce reportable priority waste, an accredited consigner can help you to create waste records on your behalf in Waste Tracker. You can register for your own account in the EPA portal to use Waste Tracker. This gives you direct visibility of information about where your waste is and who is transporting it. It takes only 2 minutes to sign up. Heather will talk to you shortly about how to do that. You can also ask your waste transporter to create the record on your behalf using the information that you provide them about the waste. If the waste transporter creates the record on your behalf, you should require that they provide you a copy of the waste record so you can demonstrate to EPA that your waste has reached a lawful place. Okay, so an accredited consigner is a person that EPA appoints to support waste producers to meet their duties. Waste producers can engage an accredited consignor to give you advice about classifying and managing the waste. Working with an accredited consignor is optional. It is one way to show us you're taking all reasonable practical steps to ensure that you meet those waste duties. While an accredited consignor can help you, they don't take on all of your waste responsibilities and duties for you. Both you and an accredited consignor must meet the obligations under the law. A list of accredited consignors will be available from the EPA Public Register from 1 July. If you have the knowledge, technical skills and capabilities in classifying and managing waste and are interested in this role, send an email to us or visit the EPA website for more information. Applications are now open. So I'll now hand over to Heather Hawkins to talk about the new responsibilities of a waste transporter.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, my name is Heather Hawkins, and in my role at EPA is leading the delivery of Waste Tracker. This next section of our webinar is going to focus on the requirements and responsibilities of the businesses and individuals that transport waste. The transport of waste can be risky if it's not managed and controlled safely. It is also a key step in the waste framework to ensure that waste reaches its lawful place. A business that produces waste has a duty to ensure that they work with a transporter who can lawfully transport that type of waste. Once a load of industrial waste is collected by a waste transporter, they will have management and control of the waste. A transporter of waste must comply with the GED along with specific transport duties depending on what the classification of the waste is. Complying with the General Environmental Duty, the GED, means taking reasonable practical steps to minimise the risks of harm to human health and the environment. If you are in management or control of the waste, you must take all reasonable steps to ensure that industrial waste is transported and received at a lawful place or premises that is authorised by EPA to receive it. Section 135 of the Act outlines the duties of persons involved in transporting industrial waste. This section of the Act applies to both producers and transporters who propose to relinquish management or control of the industrial waste to another person for the purposes of transporting the industrial waste. The waste producer needs to ensure that the transporter is authorised to transport that type of waste. The transporter must ensure that they are authorised to transport that type of waste and that the driver has been appropriately trained to do so. Always ensure the location you're taking waste to is authorised as a lawful place to receive that type of waste. Never deposit waste without consent from the person receiving it. Transporting priority waste has the same requirements as transporting industrial waste, with a few additions as seen on this screen. Section 139 of the Act outlines the additional duties of a person managing and transporting priority waste. Due to the higher hazard of priority waste, the extra requirements are about safe handling and containment of that material. It must also be isolated in a manner that allows for resource recovery to occur. Information must be provided to the transporter about the nature and type of priority waste and any risks of harm to human health or the environment. If transporting multiple loads of waste, you must not mix, blend, or dilute priority waste in a way that changes the waste classification. When transporting reportable priority waste, you must comply with the industrial and priority waste transport requirements. Sections 142 and 143 of the Act outline the additional duties for reportable priority waste transport. You must inform EPA each time reportable priority waste changes hands and is exchanged through the waste framework. You must also transport it in an EPA permitted vehicle. The exception for this requirement is the transportation of waste tyres. The new system to report movement of reported priority waste is called Waste Tracker, which I will talk more about in a minute. When you're transporting reported priority waste, you must have a permission. Permits under the 1970 Act will transition into permits and registrations under the new Act. Permits will only be required for transporting waste codes B100 to acids, E100 oxidizing agents, G100 flammable hydrocarbons, and R100 clinical waste. And this is found in the A10A schedule category in regulations. The majority of permits will transition into registrations. This is the A10B category. For new permits and registrations, you will apply through the EPA portal after 1 July. This allows applicants to self-serve for permissions they require. Registrations will be automatically issued to the applicant within 24 hours. The waste codes that the applicant inserts into the application will allow Waste Tracker to be used immediately upon issue of the permit or registration. A key change is that permits and registrations will be valid for 5 years. This results in lower fees, less administration. The 5-year period commences after your next renewal. Let's look at Waste Tracker. Under the new laws, anyone who handles reported priority waste must let EPA know every time it changes hands through the waste framework. Waste Tracker is the system to do this and replaces the current electronic waste transport certificate system from 1 July. Waste Tracker operates through EPA's portal and the Waste Tracker mobile app, which is available for download soon. Waste Tracker will monitor the movement of waste more quickly and accurately than the current waste transport certificate system. It also provides users with more control and functionality to amend, change, and cancel records than the system currently does. Producers, accredited consignors, or transporters can create a waste record in Waste Tracker through the EPA portal. The new laws require information about waste movements to be provided before the waste is picked up and at the time of delivery. Once the waste record is created, the transporter assigns the waste load to a driver. The driver will only see records that they are assigned to them. The driver must enter information about the vehicle into the Waste Tracker. The driver confirms the amount of and type of waste at the time of waste is picked up. The driver then confirms the waste is delivered when it is dropped off. The location of the waste pickup and drop-off is automatically captured. Receivers confirm they have received the waste at the time of delivery. They can still do this even if the waste driver has made an error or hasn't completed their section of the waste record yet, or if the waste was consigned by the producer to a different receiver. The Waste Tracker mobile app has offline functionality and allows you to search through active records. The search bar also works with the phone is offline. The waste records you will see will depend on when the app was last synced. To learn about Waste Tracker in more detail, we encourage you to watch a webinar on the system EPA held on the 23rd of February this year. We also encourage you to watch the videos on EPA's website for more information and to share them with your business if you or they will be using Waste Tracker. The short demonstration videos we have show the common tasks available to be completed in Waste Tracker. The Waste Tracker has been designed for easier waste record management, allowing your waste records to be set up and kept in draft. The new system also allows cloning of waste records. These cloned records can be used to quickly set up a new consignment for repeat customers. Clone records are drafts that have the same details of the original. Information is cloned, records can be changed, such as the pickup date. You can report waste record discrepancies directly within Waste Tracker and not rely on calling EPA to make changes to the waste record. You can email a PDF for the waste record for printing or forwarding to other parties for their records. The new laws will bring some changes to how multiple collections will work. Currently, accredited agents create a single record for multiple collection loads. From 1 July, the accredited agent role will no longer exist. From 1 July, any transporter can pick up multiple collections in a single load, provided they do not mix the waste in a way that would change the classification of the waste. The new laws require that a separate waste record is created for each waste collection. Waste Tracker then allows the transporter to group multiple collections of the same waste code into a single grouped record and allocate it to a driver. The driver then enters their vehicle details once per group load and then confirms the amount of each waste at pickup. The driver then delivers the load of waste and confirms drop-off using the single grouped record. The waste receiver confirms receipt of the single grouped record. Individual records within the group load can be rejected by the driver if the pickup was unavailable. This task can be performed in Waste Tracker through the steps you see on the screen. We have a how-to guide that goes into detail of how a transporter can add a waste record to a group using Waste Tracker. Let's go into the detail of how a driver picks up multiple collections. Drivers can use the Waste Tracker mobile app or the EPA portal for group loads. The driver assigns a vehicle for the job by following the step-by-step instructions in the guide, how a driver can assign a vehicle to pick up group waste. The driver enters their vehicle details once per group load. Once you've assigned your vehicle, look in your group records menu to find the group waste record ID. Once you have selected the group record, you need to review and confirm the details and tick a declaration that you understand how to lawfully and safely transport waste. Each waste collection within the group waste record must be confirmed individually in Waste Tracker by reviewing and confirming the amount of waste you have picked up. If the waste you collect is different from the details of the waste record, you can input that info into the discrepancy box or call your depot or office for instructions if you're not confident that you can lawfully transport the waste. Individual records with the group load can be rejected by the driver if the collection was unavailable or if you refused to pick up. When the driver arrives at the waste receiver, delivery of the group load is confirmed once using the single grouped record. The waste receiver also confirms receipt of the single group record and can do this in either Waste Tracker mobile app or in the portal. It's time to get set up to use Waste Tracker. You will first need an account in the EPA portal. To sign up, visit the EPA website and click on the portal button on the top right of screen. Once the portal screen opens, click on the sign up button on the top right of that screen. You'll need to use your own unique email address to do this. Your login details won't be moved across from the old waste transport certificate system to Waste Tracker. Businesses will also need to sign up using the business setup form. This can give your business the ability to link together all your administrative employees who will be using or viewing Waste Tracker. Once your business form is processed by EPA and your staff have signed up, they will be linked to your account and can start inviting drivers and or your site receiving staff, depending on your company. The drivers and site receivers will receive an email when invited, prompting them to sign up to Waste Tracker, and they can accept your invitation from within Waste Tracker. You can then assign waste records in the Waste Tracker to drivers. On EPA's website, there is further information on how to sign up and use Waste Tracker. We have a suite of how-to guides and instructional videos. We've also got a team of staff standing by ready to help you, so please call if you have any difficulties getting set up. The suite of how-to guides gives specific instructions for you based on your role in Waste Tracker. The Waste Tracker app will be available to download later this week. Waste Tracker will be fully activated in the EPA portal to start creating records and link to Waste Tracker app from the 22nd of June. On the EPA Waste Tracker webpage, there are many useful guides for Waste Tracker. We have these grouped by the three main roles: producers, for drivers and transporters, and for receivers. These instructional guides show in a step-by-step process how to perform the most common tasks in Waste Tracker, depending on the role you have in the waste framework. We encourage any business that is in management or control of reportable priority waste to download or bookmark and use these guides. Drivers of reportable priority waste that hold current certificates for EPA-approved training will continue to hold a valid certificate of training as of 1 July. The new laws and the new Waste Tracker system are changes that waste transporters need to be aware of. Waste transporters have a duty under the GED to mitigate risks, including the risks of drivers being unaware of waste duties. To assist waste transporters, this slide lists some key areas of minimum knowledge for waste drivers that are required by 1 July. Consignment authorisations to transport controlled waste in Victoria will automatically transition to an A11 permit. An approval to transport prescribed industrial waste out of Victoria under Regulation 26 of the Environment Protection Regulations 2009 will automatically transition to an A12 permit in the new Act. A12 permits apply to solid reportable priority waste only. Transport out of the state must have the authorisation of the receiving state. You are required to use Waste Tracker for all reportable priority waste leaving Victoria. The transport trucks must also have the appropriate A10A permit or A10B registration or equivalent transport approval from interstate. You can email yourself a PDF copy of the waste record directly from Waste Tracker and print it out to comply with a NEPM requirement to carry a printed copy of the information about the waste. You can also email a copy of the waste record directly to the receiver from within Waste Tracker. To meet the waste duties of ensuring the waste reaches a lawful place, you need to seek confirmation from the destination site that the waste is received. Interstate waste receivers are not yet able to sign up to use Waste Tracker until we have further enhancements to the Waste Tracker system. I'll now hand over to Tim Faragher, who will talk about the responsibilities of a waste receiver.
Thanks, Heather. Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Faragher, and I'm the Director of Development and Infrastructure at EPA. In this next section of the webinar, we are going to focus on the requirements and responsibilities of a business that is authorised by EPA to receive industrial waste with a permission. So as has already been explained by Mark and Heather, waste producers and transporters are responsible for ensuring the site accepting their waste is a lawful place. And as Mark touched on earlier, permissions are one type of lawful place for waste. The permissions scheme is a really important part of EPA's broader approach to setting standards that support environmental outcomes, compliance, and achievement of high performance. Under the new EPA laws, existing waste receivers that will now require permissions from EPA to be able to operate include transfer stations and waste and resource recovery facilities. Victoria's new permission scheme works alongside the general environmental duty to provide greater assurance that high-level risks are being effectively managed. The permission scheme being in place is essentially a recognition that some activities are of a significant enough risk that additional controls and requirements beyond just the general environmental duty and other duties spelt out in the legislation are actually required. The activities that require a permission and the type of permission that those activities require are set out as prescribed permission activities in Schedule 1 of the new Environment Protection Regulations. And when it comes to waste, if your site has a permission to receive a certain type of waste, then that site is a lawful place for that waste. It's important to understand that the requirement to hold a permission must be obtained before undertaking the prescribed activity. So you have to have the permission in place first. EPA will typically attach conditions to permissions, and these conditions are designed to ensure that environment protection standards are met in a way that's cost effective and that the aspects of the environment that Victorians value are appropriately protected. The type of conditions attached to a permission include a range of standard or specific conditions that must be adhered to. And these are in addition to your obligations to adhere to the general environmental duty and other waste duties that the legislation spells out. These standard conditions that are attached to permissions include requirements around risk management and monitoring programs, also reporting obligations, as well as notification requirements. On our website, you'll find a number of resources, and I'm going to touch on a few of those in this session today. But one in particular I want to point out is EPA's permission scheme draft policy, which will soon be released as a final policy with some small updates to it. So this document sets out the context for permissions within the new legislative framework and the roles of the different permission tiers, which I'll touch on a little bit further. It also outlines at a high level the factors we'll consider in assessing permissions, and it highlights the interactions between the permissions scheme and the regulatory framework for the management of waste. To give you a little bit more detail about EPA's permission scheme and the different types of permissions that it covers, there are 3 tiers in EPA's new permission scheme. And as you can see from this diagram, risk and complexity and thus the level of control required increases as you go up the 3 tiers. So at the top of the triangle, licenses. Licenses are required for the highest risk and highest complexity activities and will typically entail customised EPA assessment and also customised conditions. There's a few different types of licenses that the scheme sets up. Development licenses are issued for development activities. So this could be new activities or it could be changes to existing licensed activities. Operating licenses enable operations of activities for the life of that activity and will be subject to EPA review approximately every 5 years. The middle tier of the permission scheme covers permits, and permits are targeted at moderate risk activities or activities which are high risk but low complexity. These are lower cost and lower burden tools compared to licenses and typically are made up of mostly standardized conditions, but at times will contain specific conditions also. And then the bottom tier is registrations, and registrations are a new simple type of permission. They are automatically granted and targeted to the lowest risk activities within the framework. And these have standardized conditions across the different activity types that require registration. There are really 2 main reasons as to why registrations are used for some activities and why this new instrument exists. One, and particularly in the waste space, is to enable lawful place, so such as for small waste and resource recovery facilities. The other reason is to better understand an emerging sector to determine if that activity needs to move up in the permissions framework and to help EPA understand where that activity is occurring across the state. Registrations will apply to some other new activities. So these coming into the permissions framework for the first time, and that includes dry cleaning. It will also cover some rehoused existing approvals and exemptions such as waste transport. So a lot of waste transport vehicles will only require a registration, and also temporary asbestos storage, as well as a few other instances. Our new legislation brings waste and resource recovery facilities into the permissioning scheme. Excluding the transport of reportable priority waste, if you are receiving, storing or processing waste generated at another site for the purpose of resource recovery or off-site transfer or disposal, you will require an EPA permission. The A13 schedule category will apply if your waste facility is not captured by another prescribed permission activity, such as A09 waste tire storage, A07 organic waste processing, or A02 e-waste treatment, as a couple of examples. As you can see in the table on this slide, This activity sits across all three permission tiers. There are different thresholds based on the types of waste and the volumes received and stored that will trigger the different permission types. Licenses will be required for larger sites involved in the recovery, transfer, reprocessing or storage of waste generated at another site. Permits will be required for moderate risk sites. For both licenses and permits, the conditions will include having a risk management plan and also an environment emergency management plan. They will also cover monthly reporting on waste throughput and storage, and will designate areas on the premises that waste may be stored. Also, for licenses and permits, financial assurances may also be required to cover the cost of any cleanup if the waste were to be stranded or abandoned in the event of a fire. EPA is consulted on its calculation method for the financial assurances for these types of facilities, and it is due for publication shortly. We've posted a report on EPA's response to submissions on our website. The registrations for this tier are for low risk sites, and the type of sites that this would cover, intended to cover, include skip bin depots, smaller transfer stations, and specialist waste reprocessing facilities handling small volumes. On our website, you can find the standard conditions for permits and registrations for A13 waste and resource recovery activity, as well as other activities that require a permit and registration. And in the coming days, operating license conditions will be available on the website too. For sites that are already operating in the large to medium waste and resource recovery facility thresholds, there is a temporary exemption included in the regulations that allows a 3-month period in which you have to apply for a license or permit. So you need to have those applications in by 1st of October to be able to continue the operation of that site. For those that fit into the registration tier and are already existing sites that are operating, there is a temporary exemption that allows 6 months to apply for that registration. If you're seeking to set up a new waste and resource recovery facility, then you must apply for the necessary permissions from 1 July. Existing permissions under the current legislation are being transitioned to the new relevant permission type in a 3-step process to make sure they're compatible with the new legislation. And I just want to outline those 3 steps for you so you're clear on how the transition will work. As you can see on this diagram, in the first step, most existing permissions, such as licenses, works approvals, and vehicle permits, to name a few, will automatically transition to the equivalent permission under the new framework at the 1st of July. You don't need to do anything for that to happen. So for example, if duty holders have a current license, this will automatically transition to an operating license under the new Act. There's no need for existing license holders to reapply. For those permissions that have waste codes, step 2 is applicable, because the current waste codes need to be amended to translate from the current state into the new waste codes that are established under the new legislation. This is essentially a mapping exercise and is to ensure Waste Tracker is appropriately enabled at 1 July. Proposed notices of amendment have already been sent out to these permission holders that have waste codes. It's really important that you check these proposed notices of amendment to ensure the codes have been mapped appropriately. In the instance, perhaps that you've recently obtained a vehicle permit, a new one, since the start of May, your proposed notice of amendment will be sent out in a few days' time. The actual formal amendment will then occur on the 1st of July, at which time you'll be issued with a notice of amendment. This notice will formally amend your current permission to apply the new waste codes. All other conditions in your current license or your vehicle permit or registration, as it might transition to, will remain the same on the 1st of July. and you will not receive an updated version of your license or permit or registration on the 1st of July. So the notice of amendment is what will explain the new waste codes. Step 3. After the 1st of July, EPA will commence the process of updating operating licenses to align the conditions to the new Act. This process will take up to 12 months and will be done on a sector by sector basis. It is intended that waste-related operating licenses will be amended in Q1 of next financial year. The process for these updates will involve removing conditions that are no longer required as they are covered by the general environmental duty. So for example, general amenity conditions in relation to odour, dust and noise will no longer be specified in licenses as they are covered by the duty. We'll also be amending some existing conditions to align them with the new framework, and some new conditions will be added, such as standard requirements around notifications and reporting and risk management and monitoring program, as I've already mentioned. Just as is the case with step 2, for step 3, when these amendments occur, you'll be issued with a proposed notice of amendment that you can comment on before a final amendment is issued. And it'll be at this point of the final amendment being issued that you'll be issued with a new updated statutory document. It's also important to understand that you'll be able to request 6 months to comply with new or amended conditions, and we will make this clear in that amendment process. Some other changes to note are that while licenses issued under the current Act do not have an expiry date, new operating licenses issued under the new Act will have an expiry date. Those licenses that transition, it is not EPA's intention to put expiry dates on those. It's just for new operating licenses. The new Act also provides for periodic review of operating licenses to ensure they are kept up to date with changing science, environmental conditions and community standards, and it is intended that these will occur approximately every 5 years. So as has been indicated a number of times, from the 1st of July 2021, you will have obligations under the general environmental duty, as well as other duties that are part of the new legislation. It's EPA's expectation that until your permission is amended, that you will continue to comply with the existing conditions. There's a range of additional information available on our website to support permission holders. This includes guidance for operating licenses on the link that you can see on this screen. All licenses and all new permissions, in fact, will be issued on new templates. And the template, the operating license template, will contain a standard preamble on the provisions of the Act under which the license is being issued. It will also cover the broader legal context in which that license exists, as well as a description of the license. This preamble will detail the context, key information, including compliance requirements and duties under the Act, and where to go to for further information, as well as the operating license structure. So that's another resource of additional information that will be available to you. As I've already indicated, from the 1st of July, there are some activities that didn't need our authorisation currently that will now need a permission. For example, you will need a registration if your activity involves smaller landfills, small-scale waste tyre storage, and dry cleaning. Some temporary activities like outdoor concerts and use of some waste now need a permit as well. Most of the waste industry will need an EPA permission, and as I described in detail earlier, this includes waste transporters, most waste receivers, and processors, including resource recovery facilities. The regulations are the definitive requirement of what activities require a permission and what type of permission that activity requires. And you can visit the EPA website to find out more about if some of the activities that have come into the permission scheme and what permission is required and how to obtain one. And so for these new activities coming into the permission scheme, our website contains useful information that are specific to these activities, including when you need a development license, when you need an operating license, when you need a pilot project license, when you need a permit for medium risk activities, when you need a registration for low risk activities. This page also lays out directions on what to do if you currently have an EPA exemption. The EPA portal is where you can apply for the entire range of EPA permissions. To access and create an EPA portal account, first visit the EPA website and click on the portal button on the top right of the screen, as Heather explained earlier. This will take you to the portal where you can sign up to create an account. The portal is where you will be able to apply for EPA permissions. Applications for licenses and permits will require a range of information with those, and some of the details of this type of information can be seen on this screen. Guidance on how to apply for a permission will also be available on the EPA portal application area. Currently, the portal is open to enable users to sign up and obtain their account access. And from the 1st of July, it will be able to be used to lodge permission applications. Finally, for waste that is deposited to landfill, there are some key changes to Victoria's waste levy. From the 1st of July, waste levies replaced landfill levies. And waste levy is payable for every tonne of waste that is received at a landfill. To incentivise Victorians to reduce waste and recycle more, Victoria's waste levies will increase from 1 July 2021. In response to challenges faced during COVID-19, the Victorian Government did not proceed with the 2020 increases, instead providing councils and businesses with more time to prepare for increases starting from the 1st of July 2021. Currently, Victoria's levies for municipal and industrial waste are lower than all the other mainland states, and the new levies will more closely align the amounts with other states, and as such will deter waste being sent to Victoria from interstate. More information about the current landfill levy and future waste levy rates and the specific details of those is available on our website. There will still be a waste recovery rebate available for waste transferred from landfills for resource recovery within 3 months of waste receipt. However, there will no longer be a rebate for contaminated soil or recycled waste that is removed more than 3 months after being deposited at the premises. I'll now hand back over to Dan, who is going to talk you through EPA's compliance expectations of the waste and resource recovery sector.
Thanks very much, Tim. So protection of human health and the environment is a responsibility shared at all levels of government, industry, businesses, communities, and the people of Victoria. Everyone operating in the waste framework has certain responsibilities when waste moves from one part of the supply chain to the next. To recap the key messages about waste duties: classify the waste, transport the waste appropriately, and send it to a lawful place. If the waste is priority industrial waste, you also need to investigate alternatives to disposal and isolate it to promote resource recovery. If the waste is reportable priority waste, you also need to use Waste Tracker and a permissioned vehicle. Understanding your responsibilities if you operate within the waste framework is the first step to operating in compliance with the new laws. At EPA, we prioritise our efforts based on risk and where we can make the biggest difference to the health and livability of Victoria. We use science and intelligence to assess risk in terms of the likelihood of the risk occurring and its impact. EPA's enforcement action aims to stop unlawful activity and remedy any harm caused by non-compliance, including using restorative justice. Ensure future compliance is achieved and is sustainable. Raise awareness of the new laws and consequences of non-compliance, and punish offenders and remove any commercial advantage gained through non-compliance. In determining the appropriate enforcement response, we consider the nature and seriousness of the non-compliance, the risk of harm that has arisen from the non-compliance, the culpability of the offender. So for example, was the law intentionally broken? And the characteristics of the person engaging in the activity. You must report pollution incidents as they occur and respond quickly when EPA raises issues. You must also report any breach of your EPA license. In operating with a notion of transparency, fairness, and a shared responsibility, EPA's compliance and enforcement approach is available on our website. We expect you to be open and honest in your dealings with us and understand that we'll take an escalating approach to enforcement based on the circumstances surrounding any breach. This means we respond more harshly if a business is resistant, evasive, or doesn't account for its risks. The changes that the new laws bring to the Victorian waste industry are significant. The new requirements will enable enhanced compliance and improved environmental risk management outcomes. Equally, the changes will support sustainability of the waste and resource recovery sector by facilitating a level playing field for industry participants. EPA acknowledges that the change management practices for technology, processes, procedures will vary across different businesses and sectors of the waste industry. The increased technology requirements will present human factors and minor variances that are likely to take a period of transition to stabilise. That the knowledge will be necessary to enable day one activities and will require continuous improvement. Industry management practices are focusing on ensuring full compliance with their obligations. And collective engagement with waste producers is difficult, and this is an ongoing challenge. EPA maintains its prescribed responsibility to ensure compliance with Victoria's Environment Protection Framework. For the industry, particularly for those that are required to use Waste Tracker, businesses are required to have technology, processes, and knowledge competencies in place to enable compliance with the required waste duties. Where initial variance from those requirements occurs, EPA will focus regulatory effort where it is deemed to be in the public interest. Over the course of this session, we've referenced several sections from the EPA website. We'll be sending you these links after the session is over, so you have them for reference. We encourage you to read each of these to get more detail and depth on each of the topics we've covered today. And we appreciate it if you can share this information back through your business and the people in your supply chain. We've also referenced several sections of the Environment Protection Act and regulations relating to waste. These are captured on the screen for your reference and use. We'll now move into question time, and I'll work with my other fellow presenters to try and answer some of the questions that you've provided for us today. So the first question relates to training in the new laws. So what is EPA doing to provide business with training on the new waste laws? Will a delegate be sent out to provide training? Will you have drop-in sessions? So we're not sending any staff out to train businesses. However, we are continuing to work through EPA reference groups and various associations to support and prepare all Victorian businesses. We've got lots of sector-based guidance and publications available on EPA's website. We have given a series of webinars like this one on the new laws, Waste Tracker and the general environmental duty. This webinar will be sent to you soon with many of the links to all the information and guidance that we've talked about today. And we encourage you to sign up for the EPA Business Bulletin for further updates. That'll make sure you're kept up to date with everything happening within EPA. The next question I have is regarding Category D soils. So how will Category D classified soils be managed? Will they be accepted by landfills as a separate category and reported to EPA? Mark, can I throw to you to answer that one, please?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So Category D is a new category of contaminated soil under the EP regulations. Look, it is a splitting up of the current Category C. So landfills that are currently licensed to receive Category C will also have Category D added to their license. The primary driver for separating Category D is really around enabling reuse on quite large sites and infrastructure projects where contamination may continue to occur. So you may be able to apply for a permit in some cases where you need to use Category D soil on a project site. All of that is outlined in the regulations, and there'll be more information on the EPA website under the classifying waste and managing soils area.
Thanks very much, Mark. So the next question I have is regarding the change for drivers. Heather, I might throw this one to you. Do waste drivers now have a liability that they didn't previously have?
Thank you, Dan. Sorry. It's an important distinction that to look at. So drivers are in management or control of waste when they're transporting the waste. They have duties, not a liability. So it's an important distinction to make, but we recognise this is a big change. WasteTrack is a change for drivers in the process that they deliver. They will need to take all reasonable steps to ensure the waste gets to a lawful place, and that they have and that they know where the waste is going. If the waste is reportable priority waste, they need to know that they are transporting it using the correct transport permit or registration, and that more information is available on EPA's website if they have any questions.
Thanks, Heather. Next one is relating to tyres. So are there any particular issues that tyre recyclers need to look after? Tim, can I throw that to you to answer, please?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. There is a new permission tier for tyre storage. So if you're storing less than 5,000 EPU, so equivalent passenger units, or greater than 5 metres cubed of waste tyres, then you will need to apply for an EPA registration via the EPA portal. The current requirement that exists for duty holders storing more than 5,000 EPU to have a permission has been carried over into the new framework, so that doesn't change. It's also important to note that tyre pieces or shredded tyres would fall under the A13 schedule category, which I covered earlier, which also requires a permission. And I think finally, just on this question, Dan, waste tyres and tyre pieces are a reportable priority waste for transactions. So this means that any transport of waste tyres must be reported to EPA using WasteTracker.
Thanks for that, Tim. Next question is related to unlicensed businesses and risk. I might have a bit of a go at this one. So the question is monitoring and risk assessment mandatory if my business does not hold an EPA license? So essentially, every Victorian has duties under the general environmental duty to minimise the risk of harm to human health and the environment from pollution and waste. So I'd encourage you to look at EPA publication 1695, titled Assessing and Controlling Risk. That's a really great resource for business that outlines a risk management framework to help prevent harm. Our recent EPA webinar called The Role of Industry and Business in Protecting the Environment is also a great resource for business to learn how to comply with the general environmental duty. Okay, I've got a couple of questions relating to fill material. So does fill material need to be tested is the first one, or will a site assessment or that determination be talked about to be sufficient to transport fill material? Mark, I'll throw to you to answer that one, please.
Yeah, look, thanks, Dan. Yes, the fill material determination, I think, will cover a lot of your questions. So when that comes out, which I hope will be very shortly, you'll notice that, as a site assessment, if you're really sure that this site is clean, has had no history of industrial use or any kind of use which might contaminate it, then you can consider that fill potentially without testing. Look, I think if there's any reasonable suspicion that it might be contaminated or it is in an area with a history of contamination, of course we would ask you to test it before moving it on. The determination will require you to just give your test results to the person who's receiving it, and we know that that's current best industry practice to pass on that information. But by and large, it doesn't change the current state a whole lot. Instead of referring to IWRG 621 for your fill material contamination thresholds, it'll be table 3 of publication 1828, where you'll see those stepped out for you. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks very much, Mark. So Heather, I'll throw this one to you. This is all about Waste Tracker. So if the Origin site doesn't have access to a computer to generate waste records on the new Waste Tracker platform, how can they complete it?
Thanks, Dan. So there's a really important distinction between our current and our new systems, in that the waste generators can set up to use our new system, Waste Tracker, by signing up for the EPA portal account using a browser on their smartphone or device. And we're no longer limited to using the system on a desktop computer as the current system is. So it's a very important improvement and distinction. Once you have your EPA portal account, you can use your mobile phone or smart device to log into Waste Tracker and create your waste records there. Waste generators can also engage the credit consigners to create their records in their behalf, and they will also maintain visibility of that in the system. Another option is to ask your waste transporter to create records on your behalf using the information that you provide them about the waste record. But remember that you won't get the direct visibility of the waste record in Waste Tracker that way. You'll need to ask your transporter to provide you with a copy of the completed waste record.
Thanks very much, Heather. Next one relates to municipal waste codes. So what waste code will municipal wastes and FOGO be under? Tim, can you have a go at that one, please?
I can. So municipal curbside waste and FOGO do not have prescribed waste codes set out in the regulations. And this is because these wastes are not classified as industrial waste until it crosses into management at a facility such as the transfer station. However, there will be permissioning codes for these wastes included in permissions at receiving sites where needed. So, for example, making it clear which landfills can accept each type of waste. So it'll be clear in the permission what types of waste ultimately can be received there.
Thanks, Tim. So we've had quite a few questions come through with various scenarios relating to having contracts or subcontracts in place for waste management. So essentially, to try and provide a generic answer to those questions, all businesses have to comply with the general environmental duty and the waste duties under the Act. One way to ensure that you're taking reasonable steps to know what's going on with your waste when you subcontract that out is to request receipts, as Heather just mentioned, of that waste. That way you can make sure that it's been sent to a lawful place. So wherever you have contracts in place, I'd suggest that you obtain independent legal advice about contract law, including, compliance clauses and responsibilities of each party under the various laws and that contract. Application to land of organics. Mark, I'll probably throw this one to you. So some local farmers take mulched organic garden waste, composting's not managed, and apply it to laneways and feed pads, which is legitimate and useful use of the material. So would a DOU, declaration of use, be suitable for this, or would this breach the regs section 64(1)(ai), very specific question, application of waste to land?
Thanks,
Hopefully
Dan.
you can answer that one.
I'll give it a go. I mean, look, I think I have to answer this in very, very general terms. I mean, specific scenarios are always hard to answer in these forums. But look, I would say that the DOU is appropriate for application to land where it's commercial garden or landscaping organics. And by that, we really mean no foods, no animal waste, things that could be, could cause harm or a risk. And they don't contain physical or chemical contamination. So that's, of course, things like plastics and so on. Untreated timber, including sawdust, you can use a DOU for, and also the organic fibrous waste, such as husks and things like that. So at face value, it would look like a DOU would be open to that, provided it was, free of anything that isn't listed, I guess, in that that list I just read out. There are a few other options, of course, and depending on what state the material is, how well it's being processed, it's possible that the processed organics determination might apply. That's very much more focused on physical contamination and pasteurization than what we put out in the discussion paper. So look out for that. It may meet that determination as well. So I think you've got a couple of choices there, depending on the grade of processing that it's been undertaken.
Thanks for that, Mark. Well done answering that question. That was a tricky one. So transport permissions, Tim, I'll throw this one to you. Will all vehicles EPA stickers be replaced before the transfer date so they align with all the new waste codes?
The EPA will no longer issue stickers for vehicle transport permissions. And so, as I explained earlier in the webinar, what you will be issued at 1 July is a notice of amendment that sets out the waste codes that can be transported under the permission and how they've been mapped from the current waste codes to the new waste codes. So that will be what you get on 1 July.
Great, thanks, Tim. So I've got a question here related to the duty to investigate alternatives to waste disposal for priority waste. So how does EPA intend to enforce the duty to investigate alternative to waste disposal and resource recovery talked about earlier during the waste duties of reportable priority waste? Okay, so there's no direct penalty associated with failing to investigate an alternative to waste disposal. You may be issued with compliance advice or with an improvement notice by an authorised officer if you haven't investigated those alternatives. If you then don't comply with the improvement notice, penalties may, or I will say will, apply. EPA will further develop guidelines to explain more about this duty. And Sustainability Victoria also have some good guidance on ways to avoid sending waste to landfill. So I'd encourage you to have a look there. Animal manure. So why is animal manure not now being considered as an industrial waste? Mark, are you able to have a go at that one?
Yeah, sure, Dan, I'll give that a go. Look, I guess animal manure has also historically been defined as an industrial waste under the current Act. And I think what's important here is, despite the label, we are trying to give a pathway that gives you the least resistance without having to call it a waste, without having to label it with that term. So the manures, the livestock and manures and effluent determination will be out shortly, and that's really going to be based around ensuring that it's used for soil amendments or for irrigation in the case of effluent. But really, we're trying to give it the most direct way out. It has been caught. The new laws, the new duties, everything we've just explained has meant we've had to deal with this, and we're dealing with it in the most straightforward way possible. We certainly got a lot of feedback on Engage Vic about the determination, and we're hopeful that you'll see once that comes out that we'll continue at business as usual, using manures to apply to your land for benefit.
Thanks very much for that, Mark. Look, I think that there are a ton more questions here. I'm going to just allow time for just one last question because I think it's quite a good one. So this is about transfer stations, Tim, and I'll throw this over to you. So how are transfer stations that were not required to hold a permission under the previous regulations supposed to demonstrate that they were a lawful place from the 1st of July?
Yeah, great question to finish on, Dan. So as I explained in the webinar, there is a temporary exemption period for currently operating transfer stations. So if you're in the category that require a license or a permit, you've got until the 1st of October to apply, or if you're in the lower category requiring a registration, you have until the 1st of January 2022. So basically transfer stations are deemed to be a lawful place during this temporary exemption period. And so I think for our purposes, it's just about being able to demonstrate that you were in operation prior to 1 July. And we'll make it clear, you know, to everyone that's the expectation for those sites. And this is just one of those pieces that is part of the transition, and we need to give people time to put those applications in.
Thanks very much, Tim. Okay, I think that we're going to have to draw question time to a close there. Thank you to my fellow panelists. So as the new laws and duties of the Environment Protection Act take effect on the 1st of July 2021, our focus over the next 5 years will be on establishing the new legislative framework and supporting duty holders to understand and comply with the new laws, whilst maintaining our effort on prevention of existing priority harms and improving our ability to address risks and emerging threats. So at EPA, we're directing our efforts to creating an environmental protection culture, embedding duties of environment protection, targeting deliberate and criminal non-compliance, strengthening the preventative control framework, equipping and working with our partners, and enhancing our capabilities to be more effective at preventing harm from occurring. So I'd encourage all of you to visit EPA's website to learn more about your responsibilities if you own or manage a waste and recycling business. You'll also find a huge range of how-to documents and guidance that we've prepared specifically for your industry. I'd encourage you to contact us if you have any questions about your responsibilities, industry guidance that's been developed, or how to get involved. You can also contact us with general questions about the new laws. We encourage you to subscribe to the EPA Business Bulletin to hear more about any upcoming consultations, events and workshops that we hold, the how-to information that we're producing, guidance that we're producing, and compliance and enforcement approaches. I'd just like to thank you all for your time here today, and for all of the questions that you've posed. Those that we weren't able to get to, as I said earlier, we will make sure that we feed those responses into our website content and into our guidance. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.